Welcome to Double Overtime, Ulti World's Professional Ultimate League podcast. Episode 5 after week 5 of the Premier Ultimate League and week 8 in the Western Ultimate League as the Western Ultimate League finishes its regular season. I'm Jenna Weiner. He's Sasha Vogel. Sasha, excited to be with you here as always. And welcome back home from your travels. You were in Houston this past weekend, right?
Yeah, I was in Houston playing in the Continent Tour stop in Houston. It was a lot of fun. Met a lot of the black players from Texas. Was able to play with them, and my team came away with the win. Yes,
congratulations! Very exciting. Yeah. Remember, I was seeing on social media there were some technical difficulties, so there wasn't a stream available, but I know that I and I'm sure many others are very much looking forward to seeing the tape once it all gets put up and put together, because I'm sure it was a fantastic game, even though we didn't quite get to see it live stream. Yay, when technical difficulties we run into issues like that, but as it goes.
Yeah, a lot of fun, a lot of good plays, and hope everyone enjoys it when it drops, which should hopefully be very soon.
Keep an eye on Disc Diversity's social pages. It should be posted there when all is said and done. Continent Tour game in Houston, one of many, many Ultimate games happening across the weekend. AUDL continuing their season. Obviously, the games that we're really focused on, that we really care about, Western Ultimate League and Premier Ultimate League. Sasha, where should we start?
Let's start in the Western Ultimate League, going out west, and we'll start with LA Astra against the San Francisco Falcons. And unfortunately, this game was not live streamed, but Jenna, you were there and you were commentating on the game.
I was in the booth.
So tell us everything we need to know about this game.
It was very exciting, and I hope everyone watches it when it comes out. Hopefully by the end of this week, fingers crossed. You'll get to hear me. I tweeted this out after the game. I felt like I was basically losing my voice by the end of the game because it was so exciting. But at the start, it was very windy. A little preview for our sub bonus segment that we are actually doing this week. We're going to talk a little bit about the weather because it's definitely been impacting games in both leagues. And we'll just talk about weather and Ultimate and how it works or doesn't work together. But in the SF LA game, it was very windy to start. First quarter, spoilers, ended 1-0 to San Francisco, which is not a score you normally see or normally think about. Both teams struggling to get their offenses really rolling in the wind, and then it got exciting. It was back and forth. San Francisco went on the run, and then LA kept it close. All the while, I was trying to, in the commentary booth, keep track of, all right, in this scenario, then this team makes it, and if the score remains at this margin, then it's going to be this team. And it was close, and it was like, all right, end of third quarter, LA's down by 3, 8-5. Been a good game, some really great highlight plays, and LA needs to keep the margin within 4. They were down by 3, great, doable. And then SF goes on an absolute run, breaks the game wide open, and all of a sudden I'm finding myself in the commentary booth being like, LA is going to be out of it at this point to make championship weekend. It's going to be Arizona, except SF got to plus 7 point margin and they needed 8, and there were 40 seconds left. They couldn't force the turn. LA ended up scoring, ended up being a 6 point margin. Arizona getting in despite this is the incredible part. I was realizing as I was describing the situation. Arizona Sidewinders, congratulations, by the way, are made it in at 2-4. Their only 2 wins coming in week 1. There have been 8 weeks of the Western Ultimate League regular season, and there's Arizona Sidewinders made it into championship weekend with 2 wins in week 1 at home in the Sidewinder Showdown. That is just kind of incredible. And hometown San Francisco, I was maybe pulling slightly for San Francisco to pull off the incredible, amazing, especially once they got close enough. Like initially it was like, oh no, there's no way they'll get to 8. Like there's no way. And then they got to 7. And I was like, oh, this could actually happen. But yeah, it was also very interesting at the end of the game because while San Francisco won, like the high five line was just so subdued because both teams had lost effectively. It was amazing plays, some amazing blocks, layout grabs, layout blocks, back and forth and back and forth. The tape's going to be amazing, y'all. Please check it out. It'll be on the Western Ultimate League YouTube page. And you need to hear me basically lose my voice as I almost lose my mind at the end of the game because of how back and forth it was and all the amazing plays from all the amazing players. Yeah, that was it in short. It was just amazing. And SF winning both of their home games, but losing the rest.
There we go.
So, as it goes this season. They'll be back though. SF actually looked good in this game. So we'll see for 2023.
So what happened? Like, I guess.
Oh my God.
What was San Francisco doing in the fourth quarter that made that lead happen, I guess?
So the funny thing was, at least in the fourth quarter, in the second quarter, it was more SF actually converted on the break opportunities. In the first quarter, I don't have an actual number on this. I would guess that there were probably at least 20, technically like 20 break opportunities, at least, in the first quarter. And the score was 1-0 because neither team could punch it in. It was just back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. In the second quarter, when SF took their margin out at one point to 5-1 after being up 1-0 after the first, it was LA would turn it, SF would go the other way and score. LA would turn it, SF would go the other way and score. And they're actually converting their chances more regularly. Fourth quarter, it was something that I talked a little bit about with Felicia Yang Lish. We had her on the show, episode 2. Was talking to her after the game because she was there playing for LA. And I was like, it just, in the fourth quarter, it just seemed like it was unforced errors from LA. It was just drop after drop from normally very safe hands from people who you would expect, some of LA star players, just drops. Unsure if it was the wind or nerves or what, but just unforced errors from LA. SF was converting on them. It was, someone posted mentioned the Discord at one point, like, where was this SF team the whole season? And arguably it was partially, I think, I don't want to say roster turnover, but a little bit of the team not quite meshing, SF being a scene with a lot of different club teams and players from the Falcons coming from a lot of different teams with different cultures, having to get used to playing with each other versus against each other. And just cleaner offense when SF was succeeding and LA just giving up opportunities until the final point, really, when they were able to, in 41 seconds, run the last 41 seconds off the clock and then eventually score. But yeah, it was great. Sasha, you and I were talking a little bit beforehand. I was talking about some of the highlights of the weekend we wanted to mention. At one point, and boy, I hope this comes across as amazing on tape as it did in person. Sharon Lynn from the San Francisco Falcons, at one point, I felt like got at least 6 feet in the air. Sharon Lynn is not a tall human. Got up super high to get a hand on a Dina Elimelech huck to Maggie O'Connor for LA. Sharon gets a hand on it, but it pops into the air, probably like 12 feet in the air. Again, that's what it felt like in the moment, which allowed just enough time for Maggie to adjust, lay out, and get under the disc for the saving grab for the score. I thought Sharon had made an amazing block, and then I thought there was no way Maggie had gotten it, and it was incredible all around. And that was just one highlight. I cannot wait for you to see this footage. The first quarter is a little rough in the wind. Wind dies down. The Stars come out to play. It was incredible. And both teams lost. weirdly enough. It was just, it was a very surreal game. Again, congrats to the Sidewinders. But yeah, just being there in the stadium, knowing that both teams felt terrible, despite SF winning at home, was one of the stranger feelings I have had in an ultimate game situation. That's the summation. It's, I'm getting excited talking about it and trying to leave enough on the table while also being like, oh my god, it was amazing because it was that good. Again, first quarters were a little rough, and then it was just top-notch drama the entire rest of the way.
So basically what I'm hearing is when it drops, just completely skip the first quarter.
I wouldn't completely skip the first quarter because you should watch it.
Skipping the first season of I don't know, Parks and Rec or something like that.
Yeah, it's a little rough in the intro, and then it evens out. And actually, again, you'll hear some of this, and this is probably a little bit more insider info than I should give. But I didn't realize the first quarter had ended when it did, because it just felt like it was so back and forth. I was like, oh, it's just gonna continue because it's the same point. Basically, it's different timeouts were taken. I was just like, oh, and somehow it's the end of the first quarter, and somehow the score is 1-0.
1-0.
I almost thought in that moment, I had the thought to myself, and I don't think I said it on commentary, but I had the thought of, is this game just going to end up 4-0 and LA is going to make it to championship weekend? If this just, because sometimes you like to do that after I know sometimes in college football in particular, when a team is winning by 28-7 or 28-0, you're like, oh yeah, they're going to win 84-0. As if that's going to keep up. I had the thought of watch this just be 4-0, but no, it was 13-7. Amazing game. Watch the first quarter, y'all, but just know it gets better.
Well, that sounds exciting. And just real quick with standout performances from Jackie Nguyen. She had 3 goals, and Julia Ting had 3 assists. This is all from the WUL Insider Twitter. They also said Eliza Chang played only the 4th quarter and still logged 2 assists. That's pretty impressive.
SF scored a lot in the 4th quarter, so it makes sense that Chang got 2 assists then. Yeah.
And then on LA side, there was a lot of players logging multiple blocks, and Connie Wang getting 3 and Dana Elamelic getting 4. And Stephanie Pritchard got 3 goals and Connie Wang with 3 assists. Yeah, lots of stats for people.
Lots of stats. Just standout performances all around. And again, the number of highlights, the number of layout blocks and diving saves and towing the line is just was top notch ultimate. Certainly for the feel of it and being able to be up in the commentary booth for it. That being said, Sasha, should we talk about the other Western Ultimate League game, which I have written down in my notes as one of the best games of Ultimate that I have watched, which is maybe a slight exaggeration, but Seattle pulling out the win after being behind 22-20 over Oregon Onyx was amazing. Sasha, you want to walk us through it?
Yeah, they were behind by what? I think at most 3 goals at one point.
It was a close game throughout.
Yeah, it was pretty close. I think one of the, just not really game related, but one of the coolest things was that this was in conjunction with the Seattle Oregon AUDL game. And they played before that in the Portland Timber Stadium. So that was pretty cool. I think that, I think we should see that more often, having the AUDL and the WL or PUL teams kind of joining together to create this little double header for their fans. Thought it was really cool.
It is very cool. I will just also note that when both times that this has happened, the doubleheader at the Portland Timbers, and I want to say Portland Thorns, if I remember the NWSL team name correctly.
I believe so.
Both times the AUDL, the Nitro game, was first and then ran long, which pushed the Onyx game back on delay, which I don't love. I understand that happens, and that oftentimes, like the nightcap games, like the end one is like supposed to be like the premiere show, and it absolutely was in this case. And just trying to be thoughtful about, like, let's not have it be a situation where players have to like clear their stuff out of the locker rooms or we lose the broadcast partway through, like what happened in the Oregon LA game earlier in the season. No such problems this time around, but the broadcast was delayed a little bit because the ADL game went longer than expected. So, some hiccups, some logistical things still to work out, but you'd expect that with two teams still in their inaugural seasons.
Yeah, for sure. So getting to the game, yeah, like you said, it was very, very good game, really close throughout. There was a lot of plays happening. Lots of layouts, lots of big throws. It was very exciting to watch. And I guess the weather was absolutely perfect because like everyone looked incredible, And I feel like, when the weather isn't great, it's really hard to play really good Ultimate. But this game was a lot of fun. And Seattle, like you said, Seattle came out with the win.
Yeah, and looking back at the Twitter feed, 9-9 at halftime, 17-15 Oregon lead at the end of the third, which Oregon was like maintaining that lead and just holding Seattle off for a very long time, and then it was just like a couple of breaks that went Seattle's way. The level of offensive execution also just impressed me. Obviously, looked like the weather seemed great, although interestingly, something that we've continued to see in the Western Ultimate League with the 7-second stall, teams were still running zone, presumably to try and force more difficult decisions, not make it easy for people to just flow upfield, but just really crisp offensive execution. It took a late Gina Titcomb layout block, which we've seen from her time and time again, to really like seal it for Seattle and give them that last opportunity that they needed to hold Oregon off. But it was just really, really impressive all around from both teams. And hey, they're both championship weekend. Maybe we'll see it in the final. Maybe Pacific Northwest matchup could be a finals matchup.
That would be fun.
We'll see.
Yeah, and yeah, like you said, Oregon was keeping Seattle off, and then all of a sudden Seattle just kind of broke out in a 5-1 run at the end of the game, and that's what she wrote. Some standout performances, the names that we always hear from this Oregon team: Morgan Zajon with 2 assists, 4 goals, 2 Ds; Ali Steinfeld with 3 assists, 4 goals, and a D.
And some of the best celebrations. Shout out Ali for having some of the best celebrations I have seen on an Ultimate field. Just mostly in terms of like creativity, like swaddling the disc with her jersey at one point after one of the goals. And I was just like, that is very creative, and I appreciate that creativity.
We love moms on Frisbee teams.
There are plenty, especially in the Western Ultimate League.
And then Claudia Tajima had 6 assists for the game. That's
a bonkers stat line.
That is a lot. Yeah, and then on the Seattle side, like it was again like a lot of what am I trying to say? It was all spread out. Like there wasn't really like any one person that was doing everything, if that makes sense. And I feel like that's why the Seattle team is so dangerous, because they have everybody can do everything all the time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, they're very balanced and deep roster, which we've known and just continues to show throughout. And notably, again, another team giving Seattle a close game, but Seattle pulling it out in the end. Tempest going undefeated 6-0 on the season. Despite, what was it, a 1-point game against Utah, this is a 2-point game against Oregon, and a 3-point game against San Diego. So Seattle still looking like favorites, but, in a finals matchup, potential finals matchup, to be clear, against San Diego or Oregon, there's a real chance that, Seattle's run could be stopped there. Facing Arizona in the 1-4 game in the semifinals, maybe not as much of a challenge. Arizona fans probably going to be mad at me for that, but they also did end up with a losing record on the season, and Seattle went undefeated. So, can you blame me? But it should be fun championship weekend anyway. Anything else, Sasha, from the weekend in the Western Ultimate League? We're done. The regular season is over.
Regular season is over.
First one in the books.
On to championship weekend. So let's talk about it real quick.
Let's do it. It's happening in 2 weeks. May 14th and May 15th in San Diego at Mira Mesa High School. Well-known site for those of you who watch the Winter Cup or who have seen Club Nationals. Any in the last few years have largely been hosted the final semifinals at Mira Mesa. Again, 2 semifinal matchups and 1 final matchup and a third place game. Seattle playing Arizona in the 1-4 matchup, and San Diego playing Oregon in the 2-3 matchup. Winners play in the final. Losers play in the third place game. All 4 games will be streamed on the Western Ultimate League YouTube page. Should be a fun weekend. San Diego, at this point, very used to hosting a show, putting on a show for Ultimate. And I'm excited for that weekend down in San Diego. And I mean, I think we're going to have some good matchups. Again, Seattle, Arizona might be a little bit more Seattle, quite heavily favored. San Diego, Oregon, I think, is going to be an absolute toss-up. But we have a couple weeks, so we're going to do a little bit more of an in-depth preview next week. I think we just have a few more bits of business to review from this past week, Sasha, before we move on to the PUL.
Yeah, Fan Fantasy, Jom won again. Jom's doing incredibly well. This is the 3rd time they've won the fantasy for the week, and they are leading overall. And unfortunately, I did not submit my picks this week.
Yikes.
I filled it out.
Yikes.
I did all my research, looked at the numbers, wrote them in, and I didn't hit submit.
Feels like a bit of a rookie mistake there, but it was amusing, like highly amusing to me. For that, you got to mention, but not in the best way, from the Western Ultimate League Insider account, because I'm pretty sure there's a reference to there's a note after the Week 8 Fantasy Top 10, which is sorry to report that all prop bets were wrong. Other than Alex, who bet he'd score higher than Sasha, who didn't play, who I'm pretty sure is Alex Rubin, who is sitting at number 2 this week. What a prop bet, Sasha, to be bet against by Alex Rubin tough. And just called out of just like, I bet I can beat Sasha this week.
Well, that's how I learned that I didn't submit it, honestly. I was like, wait, what? Oof. I didn't, what? I didn't play. I definitely filled it out. But yeah.
Yikes.
Tough.
Very
it's
tough.
But I am in the top 10 for the regular season, for like the whole season. So that's nice.
pretty sure there's going to be championship weekend fan fantasy. So if you haven't played yet, or if you have been playing and want to try and rocket up the leaderboard, I think you might have just one more chance at championship weekend.
Let's do it.
So should be fun. Good luck to you, Sasha. Remember to actually, click the submit button next time.
I know.
I don't think you're going to be able to live that one down anytime soon. Also, I'm not going to let you live down that I beat you 2-0 to 0-2 this past weekend in our picks. I picked correctly.
Look, it was a very rough week for me overall, apparently.
You've had a couple of rough weeks when it comes to Western Ultimate League results.
It's been rough.
I picked SF and Seattle to win. You picked LA and Oregon to win. And despite SF and LA, neither of them making championship weekend, SF did get the head-to-head win at home. So I took the 2 pick wins, and you took the 2 pick losses. So I think that as of this moment, we will get to the PUL picks. I think gives me a 3 pick advantage on you. I should write that down somewhere, but I'm pretty sure I can always go back and listen to the podcast. We are recording this after all. There is an audio record of where we're at. Pretty sure I'm currently, as of this immediate moment, 3 picks ahead. You can do this. I believe in you. We have a whole half season of the PUL to get to.
Yes, we do. And it will be mine.
I believe in you. Speaking of the PUL, should we take a little break and then talk PUL games? DC looking really good. Columbus getting their first win, and then a game cancellation first of the season. Should we do it after the break?
Let's do it.
We're going to take a quick break, folks. When we come back, everything PUL from the past weekend and our picks for the only 2 games that are happening this upcoming weekend. Stick around. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Double Overtime. We are in the second half of episode 5, talking about everything PUL. There were 6 games on the schedule, only 5 of which finished. Some impressive showings across the weekend, including the team that we're going to start with, DC Shadow. DC having a loss on the season already in a very close game against Raleigh Radiance, but blowing out 2 solid teams in Minnesota and Milwaukee on the road, both games on the road, by scores of 11-4 and 18-5. That is a combined point margin of 29-9 across 2 games. Sasha, DC looks so good, and the fact that they're not leading their division because Portland and Revo both have not lost so far on the season is a little ridiculous to me.
Yeah, early season. It's the early season.
We're halfway through now.
We still have 3 games? How many games does DC have left?
I think each team has 5 or 6 games, so I would guess that they have 2 more left. At least one of those, if I remember correctly from the schedule, is coming in the final weekend of the regular season for the PUL. Portland Rising, I think, will play 2 games that weekend, one against DC and I think the other against New York, which I think will go a long way to decide the East Division. But as of now, uneven schedules, only so much you can do. But DC, even in terrible conditions against Minnesota, and I mean terrible conditions, look so good. At one point, Sasha, they rolled off 8 straight points. It was 3-2 at one point to DC early on. And then Shadow put up 8 straight points on the road against Minnesota. Again, a solid Minnesota team that played 2 close games last weekend. Incredible. Not surprising, given the talent that they have on that roster. But very impressive nonetheless. Yeah,
they're good. I don't don't know what else to say about DC. Like they're good. And they have really, really good players, and they're well coached, and they're really good.
All true.
Very good. Because, like, playing in terrible conditions is not fun, but, when you go 8 in a row against a Minnesota team that, like, arguably, like, plays in those conditions a lot, I guess, probably, because that's just the Midwest. That happens all the time. We hear about it all the time.
Yeah.
Mid, North, Central regionals were absolutely terrible. Always.
I mean, and a little further south of that, we had some disc golf this weekend, which is an entirely different thing. But boy, conditions windy. Not good down in Kansas. Yeah. Not great in Minnesota either.
Yeah. Shout out Ella Hansen for the only under par round of round 3.
Podium, tied for 3rd at Dynamic Disc Open. Sorry, this is an Ultimate podcast, not a disc golf podcast.
Yes. Okay. Back to Ultimate. Yeah, they're good. Very good. Okay, so moving on to the next
agreed.
Team real quick. We'll talk about Columbus.
Let's do it. Sasha, you want to take us through it?
Okay. So the Columbus Pride played 2 games this weekend. They won their game against Indy Red. Oh, this is all in Indy. So they played Columbus. Columbus played Indy in Indy, and they also played New York in Indy. Okay. So Columbus beat Indy 11-8, and then they also beat New York Gridlock 13-8. No, I'm sorry. They lost.
They lost
13-8. I apologize.
Columbus 1-1 on the weekend in Indy.
On the weekend. So they got their first win.
Congratulations. My championship weekend pick is still not looking very good. Sitting at 1-3.
It was a little windy in Indy though. There were some weather issues as well in Indy. Because I mean, Indy's not like far away from Minnesota. Yeah.
No.
It's both in the
it's not particularly
area.
Close.
No, I mean, it's not close, but I mean, like, generally speaking, it's closer than I am to either of them.
That's fair. That's a fair point. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Good on Columbus for getting the win, for pulling it out in the not great weather, all things considered. But definitely in the first game, in both games, really, time management issues again. Oh my gosh, y'all, please. We just talked about it last week. Teams, listen to the podcast. Listen to us complain about time management issues. Fix the problems, please. It just is so brutal when you see teams needlessly give up turnovers and possessions with 10 seconds, 12 seconds left on the clock and just trying to take shots. I know it's an adjustment, and I probably wouldn't be that much better if I was out on the field. Very fair. And it drives me crazy already. Makes me very frustrated. It's the language I should use. Makes me annoyed to see that because it feels like it's so simple. It's just unforced errors, it feels like. And that annoys me because it feels like it should be better. And I know it's more difficult than it seems. But y'all, time management. So many instances.
Yeah, and Columbus, I enjoy watching them, not gonna lie. They're a lot of fun to watch. A lot of high energy on offense and defense. And we cannot talk about this Columbus Pride team without talking about Penny Wu.
Penny Wu, so good.
Very good. Like one of the incredible power thrower handler. And when the disc goes up, it's gonna go far.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, and especially in not great conditions in Indy, seeing Penny be able to throw up winds sometimes when I was like, oh, people are having trouble throwing wind. And Penny throws it at like 40 yards on like a ridiculous angle. I'm like, what? How? I don't understand. My brain doesn't compute. And I mean, in the indie game, it came in handy because, okay, albeit last position rules not great to like necessarily put it deep, but if it's Penny Wu, it's like, this is end of the third quarter. This is the third instance of first quarter, end of first quarter. There's a turn from Columbus released with about 5 seconds left that Indy took the other way for a break. And then Indy turned it with 12 seconds left in the second quarter that Columbus did not convert, but they almost converted. And then in the third quarter, Indy turned it over with about 24 seconds left. Columbus had a timeout, burned the timeout because third quarter in the Premier Ultimate League, last quarter, that it's possession rules. Took a timeout, talked about it, and then Penny put it deep for the score, even the game back up at 7-all, and then Columbus rolled on from there. But yeah, Penny Wu, incredible throwing prowess, integral to Columbus, and if they're going to have any chance of making any sort of a push for anything at the end of the season, it's going to ride at least a decent amount on her shoulders.
Yeah, one of my favorite things in these Columbus games to watch is there's a turnover and Penny just kind of like walks up all swaggy, like super calm, and then picks it up and then just yeets it to the end zone. I'm like, that's awesome. I love watching that.
Power throwers is our whole thing. Very helpful to have, especially in not ideal conditions. So shout out Penny for that. Also for this is much more of a Twitter thing, for having some of the most amusing sponsored player letters that I have ever seen got put out on Twitter, of Penny being very funny in thanking people for sponsoring her, because her jersey sold out for the player sponsorship program in like 4 minutes. I went on being like, later that day whenever it launched, like, oh yeah, and Penny gone instantly. I was like, never mind, another time. That's Columbus. Anything else, Sasha?
Not about Columbus, so let's talk about Indy.
Let's do it.
Okay, so Indy, like we said, lost their game to the Columbus Pride 11-8, and then later on, where is it? I can't find it.
The game that got canceled.
I can't find it because it was canceled.
It was. It's true.
The game got canceled because of weather. New York was leading. They were playing New York Gridlock. New York was leading 7-4, and then there just was a bad thunderstorm and it got canceled. And so from what you were telling me, the game doesn't count, so it won't count against either of the teams.
Correct.
Or for either of the teams. Okay.
Correct. So per PUL rules, if a game does not reach halftime, then and if it cannot be replayed, which it sounds like this will not be replayed, then it effectively counts null and void. It's as if this game never happened, these teams never played. We'll leave both teams one game shorter on their schedule, which if you're Indy is probably in your favor since you were down 7-4, although I'm assuming how the rest of the game would have gone. If you're New York, boy, that is potentially an opportunity missed to get a second win on the board.
Yeah, it's tough. But yeah, Indy, they're a good team. I like watching them. They're a lot of fun. They have a lot of throwers that are fun to watch. I talk a lot about throwing because I'm a handler myself. And so I kind of key in on the handlers, and but yeah, they have a lot of great throwers. In like Chris and Dudley's is very fun to watch. And then on defense, Anastasia Foster is one of the most electric players to watch in this league. If you ever watch an Indy Red game, find Anastasia Foster, watch her. She has great defensive positioning. She has great footwork, and she's very explosive.
Shout out Anastasia Foster also getting on the scoreboard. On the score sheet this week as well.
Yeah, she had an incredible, little cookie jar skying action. And that was really, really cool.
Very impressive all around. But let's talk New York. We've already been talking about New York from the other teams. You shaded them. To be fair, I shaded them a little bit for this weekend in terms of our picks. If they had won, if that game had finished against Indian, if they had won, that would have made both of us look pretty silly in picking Indy at home. This is something where I think some people said that the East Division, which includes Portland, Revo Pro, why am I blanking? DC. We're going to talk about in a sec, and New York could contain 4 of the best 5 teams in the league. And people are like, well, maybe not Portland. Well, maybe not New York. Well, I think we're seeing that indeed these are some really, really strong teams, some really outstanding players for New York. All around, very solid roster. Particular shout out Tulsa Douglas, Emijo, among others, Angela Zhu. Just like a very solid roster across the board. And I think later in the season, if they're not playing, say, a team like DC and their games actually finish, we might actually see a better side of New York. Although playing in that division is going to make it tough for them to make it far at all. Upcoming games for New York looks like Austin and
we got Revo.
Portland and Revo. Yeah, I mean, none of those games are going to be particularly easy. So we'll see. Again, looking at week 10, Portland's games against New York and DC are going to be pretty pivotal to seeing how the playoff spots all sort out in the PUL. All right, who haven't we talked about, Sasha?
We have not talked about the Monarchs. And they played DC.
Should we talk DC in general? I guess we already kind of did.
In general. We did. We'll get to them in a minute.
Did we start with them? No, we definitely started with them. That's on me. Milwaukee rolled by DC. Question of the day, as usual. Is this how good DC is or how bad Milwaukee can be?
I think it is it's how good DC is. Because, and we can say this with Raleigh as well.
Agreed.
Real quick, we'll talk about Raleigh for 2 seconds because we don't have much information because this game is tape delayed. Raleigh beat Nashville Nightshade 24-5.
25-4, I think.
25-4. Okay. We wrote it down wrong.
Might be.
It was a lot. It was a lot to a little. And I think that these two teams are just so good that it makes the other teams look bad, basically. They're not saying that these other teams are bad. They're obviously not bad teams. But these other two teams are just so high level that it is just it's hard to compare them. And I think that's one of the things why I thought New York wasn't going to be that great. I'm here to say right now, New York, good luck. I apologize for slighting you this past week. You guys you're very good. DC is just very, 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 very good.
And an immediate correction that it was actually 24-5 for all.
Okay.
It was a very large win.
Yeah, and Nashville's not a bad team either. they're great. Like their game against Indy was a lot of fun to watch, and like it was a good game, and they're a good team. But like when we talk about Raleigh and DC, like I said, they're just on a completely different level that none of these other teams seem to be able to play to, I guess.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see when Medellin comes to town on their road trip. But outside of that, again, Portland undefeated so far, and Indy 2-1. No shade to those teams that are leading their divisions. And we said it after the DC Raleigh game. It's like, can this be championship weekend? Can this be for the title? Because those two teams are just so good. A 29-9 point differential for DC on the weekend and a 24-5 point differential. That's what, if I can do math right, a plus 20 point diff for DC over 2 games and a plus 19 point diff for Raleigh in 1 game. Just monster stat lines, monster performances, incredible play. I know it's not going to be a very interesting game, but I am excited to watch the Raleigh Nashville game, if only to see how clean Raleigh presumably played to generate that kind of margin.
Yeah, and I think that like that's one thing that I think both the PUL and WUL can be better at is valuing the disc more, I guess. We see a lot of turnovers regardless of weather in both of these leagues, and I think that's like something that DC and Raleigh have really like I guess practiced, and they value the disc, and they just don't turn it over. And you know, when they're playing these teams and that team turns it over, the chance of them getting the disc back is very, very low. And I think that's why we have this such wide margin, is because they're just not turning it over.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something that I don't think is uncommon to see in Ultimate, and especially thinking too, like the elite club scene. Staying in sort of the women's divisions, I remember watching Fury just last year in 2021 in basically all of their games except for that incredible game against Raleigh Phoenix in the club semifinal. Teams would turn it, and then Fury would go score, and then the other team would turn it and Fury would go score, and they just rolled over teams because Fury did not give the disc back. And there's, again, 8 million examples. That's just one that comes top of mind for a similarly dominant team recently, in the club division at least. And I think we're seeing it again from DC and Raleigh. And again, I think too, it's probably a combination of the players and the depth that both DC and Raleigh have. And also, for especially in Raleigh's case, I think this is less the case for DC, but they also have 3-4 World Games players / alternates. That there's cohesion, and certainly we've talked about this a little bit with the Western Ultimate League, and I think we're still seeing it a little bit in the PUL. Teams and players just getting used to playing with each other still. Getting used to the systems, getting used to timing, that sort of thing. Made more difficult often by weather conditions. But I think we'll see it improve, especially if these players largely come back to their teams for the next season. And again, we have half a regular season of the PUL to go. So still a little TBD on all of that. Anything else from the games this weekend, Sasha, that we should touch on?
No, I think we covered everything.
Cool. We have talked about standings as well already. Just a refresher. In terms of the top of the Midwest Division, Indy is leading it at a 2-1 record. Again, that game against New York not counting against their record. Raleigh leading the South at 3-0. Notably, from what I can see here, again, thanks to Ryan Kindle for putting together the records, no other team in the South currently has a win, which, interesting. Again, doesn't mean that all of the other teams in the South are bad. Austin, Atlanta, and Nashville, just they haven't picked up a win yet.
And then will change this weekend because
that's true. That's
both
true.
of the games are only South Division games.
That's true. We'll give our picks for those couple of games in just a sec. And then the East Division, where we have Portland at 2-0, Medellin at 1-0, DC at 3-1, currently sitting third in their division with 3 wins, and New York at 1-1, again, not getting that game against Indy to count for or against them. So still plenty of games to come. Only 2 games this upcoming weekend, and then the schedule gets busy. And it'll be interesting to see how things shake out when teams have played more than 1 or 2 games, as a lot of these teams have only played 1 or 2 games, with a few exceptions. Other news, Sasha, from the PUL?
We have the announcement of championship weekend, which will be June. Officially, yes. It'll be June 18th through 20th in Obetz. Did I say that right? Obetz, Ohio?
I think so. I'm not from Ohio, but apparently.
Okay.
Seemingly. Presumably.
Obetz, Ohio. And Obetz is called the field is called Fortress Obetz. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, the fortress or complex. I think it's called Fortress Oblex.
That's pretty cool. But it's the current home for the Columbus Pride. So I'm going to have championship weekend in the Pride backyard.
Yeah. Pride playing host, and I'm pretty sure I was looking at like the ultimate calendar basically, and I was realizing there's like the World Club Championships also happening in like Cincinnati in either later June or July, and there's like other tournaments happening. I'm just like, wow, there's a lot happening in that part of the world when it comes to Ultimate in June and July. Quick picks review from this past weekend. We already have kind of touched on it. We were basically on the same page, except that I picked New York to win over Columbus, and you picked Columbus instead of New York. I think that's correct. So I went 4-1, you went 3-2. That gives me a +4 picks differential. We correctly picked...
There's still time.
We correctly picked the Raleigh result as well as the 2 DC games, and then did not pick the Indy Columbus game correctly. Neither of us did, and then we didn't get penalized for New York leading Indy when that game was canceled before halftime. So, in a little bit of a hole. But again, we have half a PUL season to go and championship weekend picks for the Western Ultimate League in a couple weeks. All right. Anything else? I think we're on to our game picks for this upcoming week. We have only 2 games, Sasha. We've been on like a 6, 7, 8, and now we have 2.
We have 2. It'd be a nice little break. So I don't have to watch so much Ultimate. I watch so much Ultimate. So much.
That's a lot
because, I gotta keep up with the PUL, gotta keep up with the WUL, and I keep up with all my friends in the AUDL and all my friends doing college stuff. I watch so much Ultimate. So this will be nice. 2 games. Game number 1, Austin at Atlanta. That is being played on Saturday. What you got, Jenna?
I will pick Austin on the road, torch, taking the loss in overtime to Portland at home a few weeks ago. But they almost won that one. And we have not seen anything from Atlanta to suggest that they are going to be able to keep up with basically anyone this season. I would not be shocked if Atlanta went winless. I hope they don't, but I would not be surprised. I don't think they're going to get their first win this weekend. I think it will go to Austin instead. They will pick up their first win of the season on the road in Atlanta. How about you, Sasha?
I am also going with Austin.
Okay. Great.
For basically the same reasons.
And the other game, Austin still on the road against Nashville in Nashville. Sasha, who you got?
I will take... I'm going to take the home team. I'm going to take Nashville.
All right. I mean, you were there. You did do commentary for them.
They look good. I now am aware that we should not judge teams based on their games against DC or Raleigh. So
that's very fair. I mean, and Nashville did lose to Indy, but then Indy has also done pretty well for themselves overall. Oh, I'm gonna pick Austin again. Mix it up a little bit. I think it also partially depends, and we don't, as of this moment, have game day rosters for the PUL for this upcoming weekend. Whether Nashville has some of their key players or not, I think will be important. If, say, Jesse Schaffner, for example, is available, I think Nashville's chances go up. If Schaffner and or others are unavailable, that becomes a bit more difficult. So we'll see. I'm going to go torch 2 wins on the road. Take them to 2-1. Second, I think that would put them in the division behind Raleigh. And that's it.
Awesome.
Those are all games to pick.
Both of those games will be live streamed, by the way.
Great. Excited to watch them this weekend. All right. Those are picks. It feels so short. Those are just the picks, and then we're done. Except shout out. Highlight of the week, Sasha. Go ahead.
Highlight of the week. Anastasia Foster getting the cookie jar sky over the New York Gridlock Defender, I believe it was. Yes. No, Pride Defender. If you would like to see that, I'll clip it and put it on our Twitter. It was pretty cool.
Sounds good. Twitter, OOT Pod. Go check it out. Sasha has grabbed that clip and put it there. I was going to suggest some of the amazing plays from the LA San Francisco game, but unfortunately, those aren't out yet. So unfortunately, not going to highlight those as highlight of the week, but I will highlight those plays as potential highlights of the week once people go and watch the game once it is released, again, hopefully later this week.
Speaking of games being released, real quick, the Portland Rising Atlanta Soul game has been released on the Premier Ultimate League YouTube. So if you would like to watch that and see how both teams did in that game, then go there.
Cool. Yeah, and games should continue to roll out. Again, Western Ultimate League, we are going to do a bit of championship weekend preview next week. I think that's next week. But otherwise, we'll have no games to review. Figure out what other content we can fit in when we don't have 7-8 games to review and recap when we only have 2. Should be a good show next week. If you are a subscriber, or if you subscribe to Ultiworld at ultiworld.com/subscribe, you can hear our subs only bonus segment talking about the weather and the different conditions that have been popping up in both the Western Ultimate League and the Premier Ultimate League. Going to talk about some of our experiences in different, say, poor climatic conditions, poor weather conditions. And if you want to reach out, let us know your own weather stories, interesting weather stories. I remember hearing some from different festivals where there's been like 30-40 mile an hour winds that people have played in. So let us know at OOT Pod on Twitter, or double overtime at ultiworld.com, I think is our email address. Double overtime at ultiworld.com. That's correct. Cool. That's it for our show this week. Thank you so much for joining us. This has been episode 5 of Double Overtime, Ultiworld's professional Ultimate League podcast. I've been Jenna Weiner. He's been Sasha Vogel. We'll catch you next week.